What you resist persists. Carl Jung's words take on a profound meaning when applied to the endless chase for pleasure. The more we seek immediate gratification, the deeper our inner void seems to grow. Jung's quote suggests that by resisting our own shadows, our deepest desires, fears, and impulses, we often amplify them, allowing them to morph into destructive forces in our lives. In today's world, the pursuit of pleasure has practically become an obsession. We're bombarded with messages urging us to seek out experiences that promise instant happiness and sensory gratification. Yet, as Jung warned in his studies, when this quest for pleasure isn't balanced with self-awareness and acceptance of our darker sides, it can turn into a dangerous trap. The relentless pursuit of pleasure can lead to self-sabotage, addiction, and a disconnect from our true selves. Pleasure itself is not inherently negative. On the contrary, it's a fundamental part of life and the human experience. However, when it becomes an end in itself, ignoring the deeper needs of the spirit and the process of individuation, it can transform into a destructive force. Jung believed that the path to true fulfillment lies in balancing our conscious desires with our unconscious impulses, integrating our shadow into our psyche. This video will explore how the pursuit of pleasure can turn into a destructive force. We'll discuss how our deepest impulses, when ignored or suppressed, can drive us into patterns of behavior that undermine our own happiness. We'll delve into Jung's concept of the shadow, examining how it influences our choices and traps us in repetitive cycles of self-sabotage. Finally, we'll reflect on the importance of confronting these internal aspects to prevent the pursuit of pleasure from consuming us. Building on Jungian theory, we'll uncover the psychological roots that lead us to turn something as natural as the pursuit of pleasure into a destructive cycle. For Jung, true freedom and satisfaction can only be found when we accept our shadows and integrate them into our personal journey. To truly understand how the pursuit of pleasure can become destructive, we must dive into Carl Jung's core psychological concepts, especially the idea of the shadow. Jung described the shadow as the part of our psyche that holds all the aspects we prefer to deny, hide, or reject within ourselves. These elements aren't necessarily negative, but when repressed, they can take on destructive forms. The uncontrolled search for pleasure often stems from an attempt to compensate for or escape the pains and frustrations that lie hidden in the shadow. Jung argued that when we ignore these dark aspects, we become victims of our own unconscious desires. The energy that could fuel our growth and individuation is instead diverted into compulsive, superficial gratification, creating a vicious cycle where each attempt at momentary pleasure only deepens the inner void. This phenomenon ties into Jung's principle of compensation. When a part of us is suppressed or neglected, it doesn't vanish. Rather, it exerts even more influence on our psyche. If we constantly chase pleasure to avoid facing our pain, the shadow intensifies, manifesting in indirect and often harmful ways like addictions, self-destructive behaviors, or toxic relationships. Jung also emphasized the importance of individuation, the process through which a person becomes more self-aware and integrates all parts of themselves, both light and shadow. An unbalanced pursuit of pleasure is a significant obstacle on this path to self-knowledge. When pleasure becomes a way to escape from the parts of ourselves we don't want to confront, we delay our journey toward individuation. Instead of becoming whole, we remain fragmented and at the mercy of our unresolved desires. A key point is that repressing these desires and impulses doesn't eliminate them. It merely hides them deep in the unconscious, where they grow stronger and eventually find a way to express themselves in uncontrolled ways. This is why, for Jung, the true solution is not to resist the impulses of pleasure, but to understand and consciously integrate them. Only by doing so can we prevent the pursuit of pleasure from becoming a destructive force in our lives, leading us instead toward a path of self-discovery and balance. In this context, we'll explore how accepting our desires and integrating the shadow are crucial to transforming the pursuit of pleasure into something that lifts us up instead of tearing us down. We'll also see how this process relates to the collective unconscious and the archetypes that shape our behaviors and choices. To illustrate how the pursuit of pleasure can turn into a destructive force, let's look at some practical examples from everyday life. Imagine someone constantly seeking validation and happiness through social media. Each like or positive comment delivers a small hit of pleasure and instant gratification. However, this relentless quest for external approval can become an obsession, causing the person to lose touch with their own essence and rely more and more on superficial stimuli to feel good. In this case, the dependence on social media is an attempt to fill an internal void, often tied to insecurities, low self-esteem, or a hidden sense of inadequacy within the shadow. Instead of facing these feelings and working to understand them, the person distracts themselves with an endless pursuit of pleasure and acceptance, pushing themselves even further away from their true self and deeper needs. Another example can be seen in self-destructive behavior patterns like substance abuse, emotional eating, or even compulsive shopping. Someone might turn to alcohol, food, or shopping as a way to escape painful feelings or issues they'd rather avoid. In the short term, these activities provide a sense of relief and pleasure, but in the long run, they intensify the pain, leading to a cycle of dependence and self-sabotage. According to Jung, the root of these behaviors lies in the unresolved conflict between the conscious self and the shadow. When a person denies their feelings of inadequacy, fear, or pain, these dark elements don't disappear. They grow stronger, projecting themselves onto the individual's life in destructive ways. The pleasure they sought as an escape turns into a tyrant that dominates their life, preventing them from finding true peace and satisfaction. Jung also teaches that we often project our shadow onto others, seeing in them what we cannot accept in ourselves. Someone dissatisfied with their own life might criticize the excesses or mistakes of others, without realizing they are merely projecting their own unresolved frustrations. This projection is a way of avoiding confrontation with the shadow, keeping it at arm's length and perpetuating the cycle of self-sabotage. These examples show how the pursuit of pleasure, when used as a defense mechanism to avoid facing our inner wounds, can trap us in a cycle of destruction. Breaking this pattern requires a conscious process of self-exploration and acceptance, something that Jung believed to be essential for psychological growth and personal fulfillment. Next, we'll explore how integrating the darker aspects of our psyche and understanding our desires can free us from this destructive pursuit of pleasure, connecting us to a more authentic and fulfilling life. As we delve deeper into the traps of seeking pleasure, it's crucial to grasp how embracing our wounds and integrating our shadow relates to the healing process and true inner freedom. Jung believed that the suffering and desires we repress play a significant role in our personal growth. When we accept and integrate them, we transform the forces that pull us down into energy that can lift us up. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, the idea that we all share a deep layer of our psyche composed of archetypes and common human experiences, plays a crucial role in this process. Archetypes like the puer aeternus, the eternal child, or the trickster are manifestations of these unconscious impulses that can seduce us into chasing only immediate pleasure and avoiding any form of discomfort. These archetypes, present within all of us, often push us toward instant gratification and away from the deeper work that individuation demands. The puer aeternus, for instance, represents eternal youth, the quest for pleasure, and the aversion to responsibility and the challenges of adulthood. When this archetype takes over, we are driven to live a shallow existence, constantly seeking new sources of pleasure and avoiding confrontation with our inner struggles. This keeps us from growing emotionally and stepping into our true role in the world. However, Jung offers us a transformative perspective. True freedom doesn't come from an endless search for pleasure, but from the courage to face and integrate these impulses. When we embrace our shadow, which includes our fears, traumas, desires, and flaws, we become more aware of who we truly are. This acceptance allows us to transform the destructive energy of our desires into something that contributes to our growth and fulfillment. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean giving in to our destructive impulses. It means recognizing them, understanding them, and channeling that energy in a constructive way. For example, instead of seeking excessive pleasure as a means to escape reality, we can use that same energy to create, to engage in meaningful activities, or to develop deeper and more authentic relationships with ourselves and others. As we engage in this process of self-exploration, we begin to realize that our most destructive impulses aren't enemies to be defeated, but parts of ourselves that need to be understood and integrated. This is a crucial step on the path of individuation, the journey Jung described as becoming who we truly are, transcending the mere pursuit of pleasure and reaching a state of more complete and balanced being. In the final part, we'll reflect on how we can apply these Jungian ideas in our own personal journey, transforming the pursuit of pleasure into a catalyst for inner growth and true freedom. Carl Jung taught us that the real goal of life is not to escape pain or endlessly seek pleasure, but to achieve wholeness. He believed that our existential journey is about becoming whole, embracing both our light and our shadow. In the pursuit of pleasure, we are often running away from our own wounds, trying to numb the pain we don't want to face. But by avoiding this pain, we also distance ourselves from a fundamental part of who we are. Jung's message is clear. Genuine transformation only happens when we accept our darker sides. By doing so, we aren't surrendering to the darkness but shining light on it. Pleasure then transforms from a force that consumes us into a tool we can use consciously, aligned with our deepest values and needs. Instead of being slaves to our desires, we become their masters, guiding our energy toward a higher purpose. The process of individuation that Jung proposes is the key to this transformation. It is a courageous journey of self-discovery that requires us to confront our vulnerabilities, fears, and unfulfilled desires. When we embrace our wounds, we no longer see them as weaknesses or flaws, but as opportunities for growth and self-understanding. This frees us from the chains of instant gratification and allows us to experience a deeper, more lasting joy that arises from the alignment between our inner being and our actions in the world. By integrating our shadow, we discover that pleasure doesn't need to be an escape from reality. Instead, it can be a reflection of our wholeness and authenticity. We begin to experience life more fully, without trapping ourselves in the destructive cycles of an endless pursuit of satisfaction. As Jung suggests, true freedom is found when we accept and integrate all aspects of our psyche rather than fighting against them. To apply this wisdom in our own lives, we can start by asking ourselves, what am I really seeking with this pleasure? What am I trying to avoid or mask? These questions lead us to explore the roots of our desires and understand how our wounds shape our choices. By doing so, we take the first step towards a more conscious life, aligned with our essence. We conclude that the true path to freedom does not lie in the relentless pursuit of pleasure, but in the acceptance and integration of who we truly are. When we have the courage to look within and embrace both our gifts and our flaws, we unleash the energy needed to transform our lives in a meaningful way. As Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. This is the essence of the individuation path, to awaken to oneself, to recognize one's shadow, and ultimately to find true freedom in the acceptance of our totality. And in doing so, we transform the pursuit of pleasure into a celebration of life and of our deepest being, a harmonious dance between light and darkness. I hope this reflection inspires you on your journey of self-discovery, accepting each step of the way and finding, through balance, a joy that doesn't rely on the fleeting, but rather on the eternal that resides within you.